everybody. Welcome to the RonLine Report. We just had the Mr. Olympia, the whole Olympia weekend, a couple days ago in Vegas. And this man was your webcast commentator, your live stream commentator. No stranger to the Olympia stage. I believe he was top 5 for 30 or 40 years in a row. Have I got that right, Shawn? Shawn Ray, everybody.
It was a long time ago, Ron. I lost track after the first decade. But yeah, it was 12 years in a row.
12 years in a row, yeah.
Yeah, I just got back. That was my 33rd Olympia in a row that I've attended in some form or capacity. And instead of going and sitting at home after 5 days Las Vegas, I decided to hang out down here at the beach and work satellite. That hence the earpods and the mobile phone. If I get disconnected, it's because I'm sitting here holding my mobile phone instead of sitting at my computer.
That's okay. We got better scenery over here than your office.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off with the big show, the Mr. Olympia, because that's what I'm most interested to hear your take on. Of course, we heard your live commentary, but this is after you've had a couple days to digest everything. I want to start with some guys that were not in the top 5. Well, actually, I want to start with some guys that should have been in the show but were not. The noticeably absent people that I think missed golden opportunities. Number 1, Rami. If Rami showed up looking the way he did a couple years ago when he was second place, any doubt in your mind he probably could have pulled off a win?
Well, since we're going to go there, why don't we talk about Flex Wheeler and Dennis James and Dennis Wolf and Kevin Levrone? I mean, I really did try my best this year to talk about the guys that were doing the business and not the ones that weren't, because for whatever reason, we like to think that the outcome would be different. We like to think that the contest would have been better. Listen, you can't win the Mr. Olympia unless you're in it. So if you're not in it, I don't think you should be in the conversation, simply from the mere fact that these guys have to jump through hoops, Ron. You know that. You have to survive the course of the calendar year and beyond the contract that you sign and beyond the contest that you actually qualify with. You have to survive all these things and make it through even the press conference to get on that Olympia stage. I remember one year, Ronnie Coleman didn't know he was going to compete. He was in a bathtub full of ice.
Correct.
So if we're going to talk about those guys that coulda, shoulda, woulda, we might as well go all the way back and bring back, some guys that we would love to see. I'd love to see Bob Paris compete again, or even Lee Labrada. I'm putting Rami, I'm putting Kai Green, I'm putting Sean Roden. They're all in that category. They didn't qualify, so they're not going to get their 5 minutes of fame in this conversation.
All right, let's talk about the guys that did show up and made the effort.
Absolutely, it was interesting.
The special invite went to Cedric McMillan, and I've always said, everyone said, many people think, that's Mr. Olympia. If he ever gets in just crazy condition, that's Mr. Olympia. This year's lineup, golden opportunity for Cedric, or it could have been, should have been.
Do we sound redundant in saying that when Cedric's in the Olympia conversation?
Yeah, well,
I think we pretty much have the same commentary every year. I believe one year he lived up to it. He got 6th place.
Yeah.
The stars were aligned and the circumstances worked out to his favor that he survived. Another year he wound up in the hospital working with Chris Aceto. He wound up having some issues with the dehydration. Never saw him on the stage.
Wow.
And I think it scared him. I think it scared him from keeping his foot on the gas when it comes down to that final prep. And we know that you got to pull out all the stops at the Olympia, and some guys are willing to die for that.
Wow.
Ronnie Coleman was one of them. He said he was near death. I believe it was in 99 or 2001.
Yeah. One
of those years he was near death, and he didn't know the night before the show if he was going to step on stage. And so I don't know. I think Cedric had his little scare, and he's not going to do the things necessary that we want him to look the way we want him to look. And for that reason, we've seen the best of Cedric McMillan. I don't think there's any more that Cedric is going to show us that we haven't already seen him, namely because he's not younger, he's getting older.
Yeah, do you think,
but he brought what we knew he was going to bring. But of course, on that stage, in that level of contest, it's all about conditioning. And on a normal circumstance, and we look at the names on the paper, Cedric's the winner on paper. Cedric's head and shoulders above the competition.
Yeah.
Cedric's beaten all of those guys.
Right.
But I'm telling you, sometimes the Olympia, the gravity of the moment and the situation and the pressure and the expectation from family, friends, fans, and trainers, it can diminish what you think you're capable of. It can scare you in a way that makes you hold water. It can scare you in a way that makes you second guess whether you're even worthy. It really does a number on guys' psyche because of the gravity of the situation. Flex Wheeler said he would never win the Mr. Olympia because he just didn't think he could ever beat Dorian Yates. But I guarantee you, in '93, had he stayed on that path, in '94, Flex probably would have been Mr. Olympia. You take away the car accident that he had. But we come to this contest with a lot of insecurities. We come into bodybuilding with these insecurities, and they follow us. And even though we get better, and even though we build a life and a career for ourselves, a lot of the bodybuilders still have that insecurity. And Flex Wheeler was self-sabotaging when it came to the Olympia. And he'll tell you, he did stupid things prior to the show. And a lot of bodybuilders do. You see these last-minute hamburger runs and pizza raids and self-sabotage because the situation is so big, so great, that not everybody can play up to the expectations that they play at throughout the year. And that's true in all sports, in boxing, and in UFC, and football. We're talking about bodybuilding. It just seems that the Mr. Olympia weekend is not something that Cedric was made for. However, we know he brings it in the March. He brings it in the spring. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into top 6. Steve Kuklo, I thought that was the best Steve Kuklo I've ever seen. I think he's stepping into his own, his prime right now. Because I had never really thought of him as a top 5, top 6 Olympia guy. I always thought he'd be sort of floundering around 8th, 10th, somewhere around there forever. But I thought he stepped it up this year. Do you think he'd stepped it up, or was just the fact that we had a couple guys missing that helped him bump up too?
Well, that certainly played in his favor that some people were missing. But he said at the press conference following it that I said, "What's a victory for you, Steve? I mean, you've been here a few years. We kind of know what to expect. You've won over in Indianapolis a couple of times to qualify for this show a couple of years in a row now. What is a victory for you?" He said, "Shaun, I just want to be in the call out in that first call out. I want to be in that top 6 call out. For me, that represents progress." And there it was. So his day was over. After they called him in that first 6, that was his Olympia dream. Now he'll go back to the drawing board and start having ambitions of moving it up a notch. And again, I'm going to slide out of the sun a little bit. Again, Steve's one of those guys that he's not a top 6 in the world bodybuilder going into this competition. But because of the circumstances and the situation, you can only put yourself in that conversation if you show up prepared. And he showed up, like you said, probably the best he's ever been. And it was a perfect storm. This guy wasn't there. This guy was slightly off, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff, all those questions that we had going on Thursday night, Friday night, they were all answered on Saturday night. And arguably, again, my favorite of the night was Patrick Moore, who I actually had in the top 6. I believe he wound up in 10th place.
Yeah, 10th.
But I actually had him in 6th place. But that I'm not a judge. I'm a critic. I'm breaking these guys down. I'm analyzing their weaknesses. I'm telling them what they need to work on. And with Steve, again, his weaknesses are the same weaknesses he's had his entire career. Like the abdominals are very shallow. The back doesn't have a lot of meat and crevasses on it. Doesn't have a lot of detail on it. The thighs are a little bit overwhelming compared to the chest. He's got great delts, great arms, great calves. But he brought just enough greatness to hold off somebody with the potential like a Patrick Moore and all the guys he beat. And his improvements were as such that I think the judges went, "Whoa, Steve Kuklo's here. Hell, we can't help but notice it. Let's bring that dude out." Yeah. And I think he definitely got the advantage of improvements and the judges noticing those improvements and rewarding those improvements.
Okay.
Not a bad night for Steve.
No, Steve, I wish the best for him. I hope this is the beginning of an upward climb for him, and it wasn't just a fluke that we had, some missing characters from the lineup. But
no, it's not a fluke, Ron. Listen, Steve, I don't think is over the age of 33.
Yeah, he's right around 34, something like that. He's still a young man.
I'd say he's 33, 34.
Yeah.
He's right where he needs to be age-wise. And for his height and his musculature, we knew it was going to take a while for that stuff to start catching up. I can imagine Steve still has maybe 3 or 4 years of improvement.
Wow.
Whereas if he was 43, it might be a different story. If he was Cedric's age, who's kind of looking like he's starting to max out, we wouldn't expect anything. But I think this might ignite something in Steve that takes him to the next level. There may be some things out there that he has not done or tried that he may add to his arsenal that might make him lethal next year. I mean, he's a legitimate threat in the top 6.
Yeah, and not for nothing, but he's also the heaviest man in the show, 285 pounds. He told me.
Well,
So
he arrived on time, and again, some people missed that peak, some people hit the peak, and maybe his peak was only good enough for sixth place. But remember, if he continues making his improvements, which I think he was rewarded for, they may be even more noticeable next year with another year of maturity, another year of hunger. He's got to be elated, so that's enough energy and momentum to carry you to the next level of training and development, because now you suddenly start to believe it's in reach. Look what happened with Brandon Curry. Brandon was what, fourth or fifth last year? Fourth place?
Yeah, fifth, yeah.
And a year later he wins. I mean, we cannot discount what Steve Kukla is bringing to the table. Good looking kid too.
Yeah. So Rolly Winkler, first I thought he blew it, but then I heard he had torn his hamstring or something and was hospitalized actually a few weeks out from the Olympia, which would explain a lot.
Well, and I don't think you're going to put that out there on the news wires prior to the show.
Right.
Because, listen, this is still his livelihood. He's still able to walk and compete and flex and pose. And even injured, he winds up, fifth place. Even injured, he winds up holding off guys with potential like Patrick Moore and Steve Kukla. So you don't want to put that out there to have everyone focusing on an injury. He was injured going into the Arnold Classic following last year's third place at the Olympia, and he dropped a few placements. He recovered from the knee injury, and he went on the guest posing circuit, continued representing his sponsor, making money. Got hurt training for the Olympia, and this happens. We saw Dorian Yates get hurt. We saw Flex Wheeler have a car accident. I mean, things happen. Josh Narkowitz could not compete because of illness. Along the way to the Mr. Olympia, there's a whole lot of things that happen that when they happen, you don't want that pity party. You don't want those people focusing on whatever it is you're going through. You grind it out and you go through it, and then when it's over, you can share your story. Unfortunately, these athletes don't have a chance to put that out there beforehand. But even injured, he had a hamstring injury, and he had some issues with his liver. The liver count was high and kind of scary. He went to the hospital to get checked out.
Oh, geez.
And you can imagine when you're on these extreme diets like this and dehydration and weight loss, weight gain, all this other stuff, it could throw you into a tailspin when you start checking your numbers. Like a week or two before the competition is probably not the best time to go get your levels checked.
No.
It could scare you because your levels could be all out of whack, right? But
mean,
he's got to make that long trip from Kuwait. And again, if it's me, I'm in the United States probably 3 weeks before.
Wow.
Actually, if I'm one of those guys coming, I'm over at Gold's Gym, 3 weeks out training the last 3 weeks or last 2 weeks before the show in the Mecca, getting photos and doing the business of bodybuilding, and then just kind of cruise into Las Vegas. But some of these guys, because they don't have that compass that we used to have back in the 90s of like coming out to California, get the photo shoots done, getting in the magazines, they stay put until right before the show, and they fly in like the day before the check-ins.
Yeah.
And I think that's stressful because of the water retention, because of the reacclimation to the weather, and then you don't really have enough time to go in the gym and sweat out all that water accumulation. He didn't have enough time to fix the problem. Could have been a lot drier, and I think we saw a little bit more than just water underneath the surface, which is why we didn't see the muscles pop like they normally do.
Now, that being said, if Rolly had showed up looking the way he did last year when he took third, would you have said that would have been a pretty decisive victory?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Without question, because the year ago, we saw what Rolly's capable of. And you take out Phil Heath and you take out Shawn Ray, and he's Mr. Olympia, and the other guys are wanting.
Right.
But again, it's like talking about the guys that aren't in the contest, and I hate hypotheticals. Rolly was there. He had every shot at this title like everyone else, and he blew it.
Yeah.
And, you can't stop an injury. You can't even predict an injury. But you know what? With an injury, you're not the same Rolly Winkler. Nor looking the way you look, do you deserve to be, crown champion.
Now, you always say Father Time is undefeated, but fourth place Dexter Jackson seems to be holding off Father Time better than just about anyone else ever has in this sport.
You talk about falling out of a tree and missing every branch and landing on your feet just when you want to say he's done. All these circumstances are playing so favorably towards Dexter as he continues to age. I mean, who are we going to kid? Dexter was not the best Dexter we saw. I don't even think he was improved of a year ago, even though he was seventh place.
Yeah.
Gratuitously, if you take out Roden, you take out Phil Heath, you take out Big Ramy, Dexter by default is fourth place in this contest on paper.
Yeah.
I knew that statistically, mathematically coming into the show. So all Dexter had to do was kind of hang on to what he already had coming in from Tampa, Florida. He was fighting it out with Rolly, an injured bodybuilder. He was not challenging Hadi Chupin or William Bonac.
Right.
So now you got to figure out what are you going to do with Rolly, what are you going to do with Dexter, and you got to take the lesser of two evils here. Dexter wasn't injured. Dexter, the criticism, however great, they were fewer than Rolly's. Rolly was significantly off from a year ago.
Yeah.
Dexter Jackson looked like Dexter Jackson, which is why we call him Mr. Consistency. He's consistently looking the same one year after the next. He didn't look bigger. He didn't look better. Matter of fact, he looked a little bit down in size. He looked like he wasn't having as good of control over his midsection that I would have liked him to have, especially in transition, and especially standing off on the side in his relaxed pose. And that was the most noticeable thing. Whereas in the past, Dexter had an 8-pack that was tight, ripped, and his glutes were shredded and his hamstrings were separated. We only saw little tiny glimmers of that. But he was battling against an injured Rolly Winkler, a water-retentive Rolly Winkler with a little bit of thin layer of fat underneath him. So he beats Rolly Winkler genetically. Yeah. Even when he's off, Rolly has to be 100% on to beat somebody like Dexter.
Yeah.
So Dexter gratuitously, genetically, and consistently went in there and does what Dexter does, and he moved into the 4th spot. I have absolutely no issues with that. When I'm talking about Father Time, clearly he was not going to win the Mr. Olympia when he walked out on the stage, and that's who I'm talking about, Father Time being undefeated, not Dexter Jackson.
Ah, true. So I would say the most popular man in that show by far was 3rd place Hadi Chupin. The crowd was going bonkers anytime he was on stage.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty physique. It's not a beautiful physique. It's a brutal physique. But,
yes,
man, I was super impressed with the density, the condition, the thickness. Did you have him 3rd? Did you have him over Bonac? Or some people had him over Brandon?
Well, that's where the contest was for 2nd and 3rd. I actually had Brandon from the shoot. Structurally, genetically, I just thought Brandon there's fewer things I'm going to rip Brandon apart for. Hadi Chupin was my number 2 bodybuilder when I saw him hit his first pose. And the reason I had him over William Bonac, and again, I'm not a judge, it's a matter of opinion, it's like, what kind of car do you like? Nobody's right or wrong. It depends on what you're going to use that car for, right? Yeah. Some people get a Ferrari because it drives fast, others get a Ferrari because it looks good. Yeah. When I'm looking at Hadi Chupin, I mean, the front lat spread, just the abdominal wall, the flaring of the quad, the veins going down the quad, and the feathers in the quads. William doesn't stand next to that very favorably because he's a little bit smaller and a little bit more narrow. Yeah. And not to take anything away from William, but Hadi did exactly what I thought Hadi was going to do. He was going to show these other bodybuilders that he could be a 212 because he could suck it down, and he could have been Mr. Olympia 212. And he can also be top 3 in the world, which I said before he ever arrived in America that Hadi Chupin was going to be top 3 or top 4. Some people laughed. Now you know why. He did that rear lat spread and that front lat spread and those biceps and those quads. I mean, there are things on him that make you sit up and take notice when he's flexing. He's not so much just standing in a lineup. But when he starts to flex, you see what the human body's capable of. And you can't help but be drawn to the conditioning that he brought, especially in light of the fact that he wasn't guaranteed a spot on this show. His visa came very late in the game. We didn't know if he's going 212 or 220. He looked every bit 225. He looked a whole lot bigger than William, and I believe William said he was 220. And I just think he was William Bonac supersized. And in that spirit, him having the lighter skin, it looked a little bit more dry. It looked a little bit more separated when he flexed. And so I had him in 2nd. And being the people's favorite, I think we all want to cheer for an underdog. We were all looking for big things from this cat. And I think the fans got behind the rallying call. One, not everybody knows or even enjoys what's going on with USA and Iran. Yeah. And these athletes, these world-class athletes are caught up in that, that controversy, and we have nothing to do with it. You saw the camaraderie on the stage. You saw the love of and the embracing of Hadi Chupin as an athlete. Nobody cares whether you're Muslim or cares whether you're Iranian. And we showed that as a sport. And so I think we rallied behind the idea that this guy finally made it to the big show. And so he was by far the most popular. He was Rolly Winkler of a year ago. He was the guy people were cheering for, and rightfully so.
So how did William Bonac? I mean, I could justify it just on shape. William's got a prettier shape. Yeah, and structure is probably not superior, but he's got rounder muscle bellies. He's got that pretty look, and as far as I'm concerned, that's how we beat him, because density and condition and thickness, and it was Hottie all day.
Yeah, and so I think you have to be mindful that he's got a very sneaky physique. William Bonac standing there looks like a very short, stocky bodybuilder with a little bit too much mass. But when he hits that back double bicep, like Neil Hill said, he's got some things that you don't see on other bodybuilders. I don't think his back is very wide when he hits his lat spread. I'm guilty of that too. We're not gifted with the width.
Right.
But he's got a pair of the biggest arms on the stage. His delts are incredible, and his quads have nice sweeps to them. And he brought the level of conditioning that was improved from his last show in Australia. So there's a lot of things that go into picking William in second place that some of the fans don't see because they don't follow the circuit. You know, I believe this was William's third show of the year, right? He did Ohio and he did Australia and now here. And these judges have a good look at him all year round. And so I think sometimes they're guilty of judging us based on how we looked, not how we look on the day. Yeah. But he definitely benefited from the fact that he was better in September than he was in the spring. William is a good little bodybuilder. The problem that I have with William is sometimes he poses like a little bodybuilder. Arnold said that about Franco all the time. You're little, you got to open up and pose a little bit more grand. You know, William poses like this.
The little guys, they hide away when they pose.
They hide away when they pose. You have to, and so when I see that, it really does. Only because I come from that school of posing, it limits what he's capable of. If he opens up a little bit more. He works on his posing a little bit more. And again, I think Hottie's presentation looked a little bit more put together, whereas William poses and then he stops and then he prances around the stage and begs for applause. And, you know, it just doesn't have the same, doesn't draw you to that. And so you get lost in his posing. I think he wound up in second place Saturday night, not on Friday.
Okay. Do you think he was third after Friday or after Friday night?
Yeah, I'm just trying to move out of this sun because it's freaking roasting out here in California. I know you guys are not going to have this kind of weather out on the East Coast very long, but I'm just going to move around. Yeah, I think he lost a little. I think he gained ground on Saturday.
Okay.
Over Friday.
So Brandon had beaten him back at the Arnold, and it was pretty clear. I didn't see him challenging Brandon, really, because Brandon just had superior mass, better structure, just pretty shape. I mean, it was. I haven't seen the score sheets, but I'm assuming Brandon probably got straight ones.
I assume so too, because listen, we know Brandon's top heavy, and I've seen some of the comments. You know, he won with no legs. But look, we want to get critical. Dexter Jackson won with no calves. Ronnie Coleman won with no calves. Ronnie Coleman won with like 2 abdominals.
That's right.
Doesn't have the perfect abdominals. As a matter of fact, a couple of them he won with a bloated stomach. Chris Dickerson won the Olympia with a torn bicep. Dorian Yates won it with a torn bicep.
Yep.
There's a lot of things when we want to get technical that we could pick. We want to have the guy with the fewest flaws, but we also want to have the guy that's most reflective of what people would want to look like, or what's possible, or what they want to represent. And right now, I mean, if I'm looking at that for the very first time, I want to be Brandon Curry all day long because he hit his poses that were favorable to his physique. And where he was getting beat in the hamstrings and the calves by certain others, he was kicking their butts with a tiny little waist and a humongous back, big billowing biceps, and a confidence that some of those other guys didn't have. Brandon's a 3-time Arnold Classic champion. He was confident. And if you looked at him when he wasn't called out, standing on the side, he's a throwback to guys like Labrada, guys like Bob Paris, that even though they were not on stage being posed and compared, he was standing there waiting to be called out again. Like, he looked like he was there to do the business. Whereas if you pan the whole thing, these guys have their hands on their waist, they have their hands crossed in front of them, totally relaxed with their hands at their side, their thighs aren't flexed, and they look disinterested. Brandon looked like he came to fight. He did fight, which is why, again, I said the other day on another show that he was kind of emotionless when it was all over, because it was like he knew he was the man. He came to pick up his trophy. So if you're coming to do the business, right, and you know that trophy is yours, you're not going to be surprised.
Right.
He'd be like, thank you. thank you. I came to get what I came to get, and I'm out of here. And none of those other guys had a reason to be disappointed. Who's going to dispute Brandon Curry as Mr. Olympia 2019?
Hadi Chupan fans, that's who.
Well, because they're not here. You got to remember, a large population of Hadi Chupan's fans were on the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
It's a different contest when you're here. And it is a three-dimensional effect when you're here watching it take place, as opposed to watching it online, seeing photographs, and having a sentimental attachment. I got chewed up because of my criticisms of the athletes online. And I'm saying, listen, I'm disconnected emotionally from many of these athletes doing the business because I don't have a horse in the race.
Right.
So I can tell you how great their quads are, how big their arms are, and be a cheerleader. But, you know, as a bodybuilder, I want to know what I need to go back to the drawing board and work on if I'm not winning.
Yeah.
Who's telling me that?
Yeah,
a lot of people won't tell them what they need to work on. And a lot of fans watching don't really know the difference between first place and third place. No. So I try to break it down to them as gentle as you can. But you know what? If a guy's fat and I call him fat, it's because he's fat.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
What are you gonna do?
They call you Sugar Shawn Ray, but you've also said in the other, you do not sugarcoat. So.
Well, I mean, do you want to pay someone to sugarcoat? I mean, because listen, Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell had a love-hate relationship. Muhammad Ali needed Howard Cosell to remind him that he is human. And Howard Cosell used to always remind Ali that there are people out there that could beat him, people that were better than him. Yeah. You know, that Joe Frazier knocked him down, and Joe Frazier beat him, and that George Foreman was this monster. I think every sport has that one commentator that either you love to hate. But at the end of the day, the one thing that I think most of these athletes appreciate is my honesty. Because, again, I don't have any reason to tear them down. I do have a reason to try to tell them what they need to work on because I've seen the best. I go back to 1988 with Lee Haney. Yeah. I've been doing this for the better part of 20 years in retirement. So I don't get pleasure in telling guys what's wrong with them, but I would rather tell them what's wrong with them than what's right because they already know what's right. Yeah. They got 20-inch arms and they got big billowing delts. They're probably wearing a shirt that accentuates that. If they got toothpick legs, they're probably wearing baggy pants to hide that. So I love what I do, and I welcome the haters. But you know what? Call me out when I'm lying. Call me out when I'm not telling the truth.
You know what? I interviewed Patrick Moore a couple hours ago, and I reminded him that after the USA, we had talked, and I said, your legs are not good, dude. They do not match your upper body. Instead of getting angry and defensive like a lot of guys would, he took that to heart. I'm sure other people told him, not just me, obviously, but he came back, and his legs they're getting there. They're almost caught up. They're well.
Well, you hear that. You hear that. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger said that someone said he was standing on toothpicks, so he cut his pants off and started wearing shorts to the gym to remind him that he had to train his calves first.
Yeah.
And, you know, it got to a point where nobody was talking about Arnold's calves anymore because he became cognizant of the fact that he needed to work on his worst body parts. Patrick Moore, again, is just a little slight for his height. He has all the tools to blow up and do these things. And being a bigger bodybuilder for Patrick Moore doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a better bodybuilder. How many guys you seen put on 10 pounds and smooth out?
Right. Well, you know what? He also told me he had a 29-inch waist on stage. Wow.
Yeah, and I doubt that there are very many people that can rival him, especially at his height. He's Mr. Potential right now. And again, Cedric McMillan before him was Mr. Potential. He realized a little bit of it. He just never realized it on the Olympia stage. We always knew he was a top 10 bodybuilder in the world.
Right.
But what we expected from Cedric was to be a top 3 bodybuilder in the world throughout his whole career because he had all the tools. That didn't happen. But there's circumstances that do prevent him from that. So he gets a pass in my book serving his country.
Absolutely.
I don't know Patrick Moore's backstory. All I know is that I see potential. And I think we all know potential when we see it. And if he nurtures it and he follows it in the right way and doesn't get injured in the process and doesn't try to become the next Ronnie Coleman, become the first Patrick Moore, he will be right where he needs to be a year from now, the same way that we saw the arrival of Hadi Chupin. Remember, this is Hadi's first Olympia, and he was third.
Yeah.
Patrick Moore with another year and a little bit of experience and a little taste. I can tell you, Ron,
top 5.
It took me a little, everybody says Shawn's always trying to incorporate himself into the conversation. I can only speak from personal experience, right?
True.
I went through this shit for over a decade. So when I did my first Olympia, I was 13th in the middle of 24.
Yep.
Patrick Moore did better than I did in my first Olympia. By the time I was in my next Olympia, I was 3rd place.
Right.
Is it possible for Patrick Moore to pull a Ronnie Coleman? He's the one guy in that lineup that can do it. in essence, Steve Kuklo did it because Steve Kuklo was never supposed to be in the top 6.
Right.
And he did it this year, so that was a big jump for him. I think next year will be even more interesting because I really do believe that this Sandow Trophy is slipperier than all of the other Sandow Trophies we've ever had. So while Brandon has it, he needs to enjoy it, represent it to the best of he can. But there's no guarantees for 2020 for him to be Mr. Olympia twice.
I feel like we're in that era from late 70s to the 79. We had Zane, then 80 was Arnold, 81 it was Franco, 82 Dickerson, 83 Samir, 84 Lee Haney. I feel like we're in one of those periods right now.
We absolutely are. And who's going to complain about that?
Not me.
I mean, listen, we all long for yesterday, right? I mean, I talk to older guys than me, and they miss Elvis Presley, right? They miss the Beatles. They miss all of those guys. And it's like, I miss Michael Jackson. I miss Prince. I miss Whitney Houston, all these iconic musicians that have died. They're gone, and the music still lives on. Well, I miss Lee Haney. I miss Ronnie Coleman. I miss Flex and Kevin, but we've seen it. We've seen that movie, and it's over. So I'm looking forward to the new blockbusters coming up. And again, these guys are only as good as the guys they stand next to. So trying to compare them with other generations isn't fair to them. Do I believe that my generation was better? Absolutely. But I got to tell you, I also believe that the boxing era of Muhammad Ali was way better than the era that we live in now.
Right.
Why? Because, hell, I don't even know who the heavyweight champion is. It's gotten so watered down. Well, bodybuilding is in a transition right now. We watched that title slip. In 2 years, it's changed hands. It went from Phil Heath, Shawn Roden, and now to Brandon Curry. So that's 3 champions in 3 years.
Yeah.
We could pretty much have a 4th champion next year. Brandon Curry's going to have to fight to hold on to it. But, man, would it be a real trip a year from now to be sitting here talking about Steve Kuklo or Patrick Moore or even Hadi Chupin? Hadi Chupin is capable. And I don't want to downplay what William Bonek brought because some of these guys are going to wind up in that Arnold Classic because it's a money grab.
Yeah.
That Arnold Classic offers up a lot of money. And one or some of these guys are going to go to Ohio. And it'll do one of two things. It will either solidify their financial efforts for 2020 and they sit out the Mr. Olympia, or they go into that Arnold Classic and get a title. What if Steve Kuklo winds up 6th here? He could be the Arnold Classic champion in Ohio if these guys all decide to take a pass.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
there's no guarantee.
Is it ironic that the top 2 at the Arnold were the same top 2 we had at the Olympia?
I think it's because it's the best we have to offer. Our very best are leading our sport right now. And both of them may sit out this year's Arnold, which leaves it wide open. Rolly's looking for a redemption, but he's been injured all year. Does he shut it down and skip the Arnold this year? If he does, now we move down to the next one. Maybe Dexter's thinking freaking Arnold Classic 10. If I'm Dexter and I'm 50 years old in November, I have to think long and hard about whether I want to sit out, knowing that potentially William Bonek, Brandon Curry, and Hadi Chupin are not going to be there. Hell, I may be able to go back and win a 10th Arnold Classic championship. Why not? I think Dexter has a better chance of winning the Arnold in this circumstance than he does beating these younger guys at the Olympia in 2020. True. That's something that we got to look out for from Dexter Jackson.
True. Real quick, the 212 division, after judging, depending on who you talk to, they had any of the top 3 winning. A much improved Shawn Clarita, who was 10 pounds up and in better condition than the year before. Derek Lunsford, who was the runner-up and heir apparent, but as we all know, that doesn't always pan out to anything on contest day. And then Kamal Gargni, 47 years old, almost 48. Guy who spent most of his career languishing in international amateur competitions because he couldn't get access to a pro card.
And politics, yeah.
And politics, were you surprised Kamal won, or did you have him clearly winning from?
No. Kamal was the winner at prejudging. I think Derek was trying to play catch up at the finals, and he did. Yeah. Derek closed significantly in on Kamal at the finals, whereas Kamal stayed pretty consistent from the prejudging. But he had built up such a lead in the prejudging. I think it was too great for Derek to close. Listen, the future belongs to Derek Lunsford. There's no question about it. He's got all the shape and all the size, and he may potentially wind up outgrowing the 212 at some point in time. Structurally, he's the 212 champion. Kamal doesn't have the best structure. Condition-wise, you couldn't ignore what Kamal was bringing to the stage, especially on Friday.
Yeah. Now, Shawn Clarita, did you ever have him in the running for the win, as some people did?
I had Shawn in third from the moment I saw him at prejudging to finals. He is the absolute best that he could have been. and he's come a very long way. Unfortunately, this is a size game. I mean, myself, Labrada, Muhammad McAway, we all were victims of guys that just happen to be bigger. And you don't necessarily have to say better. Shawn has very high calves. His hamstrings are very slight. His quads are a little bit overpowering, especially in relationship to his chest. So for those reasons, I had him in third. Condition-wise, he couldn't have done anything else. He had the vascularity, he had the separation, and he had the improvements that he needed to have. But unfortunately, he's up against the two very best 212 competitors in the lineup. If this is any other contest, Shaun Clarita is first.
Okay. Last but not least, just a little touch on the classic physique division. For 2 years in a row, it was the same top three. And unfortunately for George Peterson, the Bull, he ended up in third again, despite having the most incredible condition on that stage in the classic. But Chris Bumstead pulled it off, which was, you know, we say contests are won from the back, which is, it's kind of ridiculous to say because there's a whole physique to look at. And if you beat people from the front and from the side, just because they beat you from the back, does that mean they should beat you?
Well, I think it's time we all start paying more attention to the fact that classic physique is not bodybuilding. And therein lies the difference. I think Chris Bumstead won the competition because the criteria for judging that contest is different. We are still stuck on the bodybuilding look and the bodybuilding judging criteria. It's not about how deep your crevasses are on your back or whether you have a Christmas tree or how wide you are. Collectively, Chris Bumstead had a more classic-looking physique on the day, condition, skin tone, and presentation plays a lot into it. We know that Breon Ansley is one of the world's best performers. But Chris Bumstead, you have to reward improvement. And this is a division where, again, like the Open Olympia, I think it could change hands from one year to the next. Breon's the best at what we had to offer going in. I said that. Breon's a great representative. But you can't tell me Chris Bumstead wasn't way better than he was a year ago. And also at 6'1", he was always nipping at the heels of Breon. I'm actually kind of glad to see this title change hands, unlike the Mr. Olympia in years past when I was in it, where you had the same guy being the yardstick every single year. Literally, he could come in a wheelchair and win. This is one where nobody can get comfortable. This is a contest where he's poking the bear in Breon. Now we're going to find out what Breon's made of. Because sometimes losing makes you up your game. And let's see what Breon brings next year. How does he change his physique? His attitude was perfect in defeat. Chris Bumstead was always capable of winning this title. And he's going to represent it very well. Where am I going to start knocking him? I can't judge him the way we judge bodybuilders, nor should you, and nor should any of the other fans. This is a differently judged division. And the sooner we get the understanding of how it's judged, we'll understand why Chris won. Chris won on a number of different fronts, not to mention his condition and his height played to his favor because you couldn't help but notice him standing next to the littler guy. And it always says, you know, a great little guy will lose to a good big guy. Do I want to choose one of those physiques? Of course, I'm going with Breon. It's more my style, more my look, and more to my liking. But what Chris Bumstead brings, he brings a whole nother element of what's possible for a guy that's 6 feet tall that doesn't have to be 280 pounds to compete and also to be victorious. And he has every reason to be proud of his victory. He didn't choose himself. That tells you the judges know what they want their classic physique champion to look like. And right now, they want him to look like Chris Bumstead.
See, here's what I'm wondering for Breon. What can Breon improve on? Because he has
No. Don't even go there. Breon doesn't have to do shit. Breon doesn't have to do anything.
Because Breon doesn't have weak points, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So he can't really get better because I believe he's just about damn near perfect for his genetics, his structure, his muscle bellies. And Bumstead, he could have better arms. He could have a better back. So he still has room for improvement. So that's why I wonder if Breon can get the title back. I know I'm jumping way ahead of myself.
You are, because you know what? Breon has to just keep chipping away at what he has. There's something to be said for refinement. Breon doesn't have to go in and get bigger arms. He doesn't have to come in drier. You know, getting ready for the Olympia and making it to the Olympia are two different things. Because when you say, what does he have to do? He has to just make it back to the stage. Chris Bumstead may not even be in the damn show next year. I know he's battling some type of an ailment. I don't want to call it an illness, but there's something going on with his health that's not right.
Well,
he might realize
he has a kidney disease, Berger's disease.
Okay, he might realize in the grand scheme of things that he just realized his dream and his ultimate accomplishment, and that getting there may be affecting his future health. And so maybe he doesn't want to compete anymore. So what the hell does Breon have to do? He's got to survive 2020 and show up on the damn stage and be Breon. Yeah. And he may potentially be Mr. Olympia Classic Physique for the third time in a row. So that's why I'm saying you cannot write people off, and you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel when you have splitting hairs like this. Breon doesn't have to do anything. Breon, just keep doing what you do and looking the way you look and show up and let these guys take you out, because they have to take him out. He'll take himself out if he winds up in depression because he got beat by a big white guy from Canada. He cannot. He can't sit here. Yeah, with a mustache. I lost to a guy with a mustache. Yeah. I mean, come on. What does Breon have to do? Breon has to continue representing this division the way he always has. He's a great, classy guy in victory and defeat. You know, Breon's first Classic Physique Olympia, he didn't win it. Right. So he knows what it's like to lose. So why not change gears, put on the Jay Cutler mindset of 2008 when he lost to Dexter Jackson, and come back and win it in 2020. You know, Jay's the only guy to lose the Olympia and come back and win the Olympia. So far. Right? Yeah. So far. Dexter Jackson's been chasing that dream for 11 years now. So Breon has a very good opportunity here to come back next year and capture that title. And Chris Bumstead may be sitting in the front row, or maybe even on stage handing him that title. We don't know. In a perfect world, people get mad at me for saying when a guy's at the top of their game, they should walk away. Every time Dexter competes, Shaun says he should retire. Well, you got to remember I'm a few years older than Dexter, and I come from a place of retirement and wisdom. And when I see athletes do great things, I want them to be able to enjoy the fruit of their labor. And of course, I don't like seeing Ronnie Coleman wheeling around in a wheelchair. That wasn't my vision for Ronnie as an 8-time Mr. Olympia. I like to see him with like Lee Haney, you know, representing, promoting, being mobile, and being an ambassador. And Ronnie's doing it at a disadvantage because he's in this wheelchair, popping painkillers and having surgeries and all that other crap. But that has to do with the way that Ronnie trained and the things that Ronnie continued to do after he retired. Well, Chris Bumstead, we already know, it's on record, he has an ailment. We don't want bodybuilding and training to get in the way of making that worse. And it can, because of the stress that we put our bodies under, the things we have to do to get ready for show. And it can tear you down. You know, you say it's bodybuilding, but it can tear you down when you're at a disadvantage. So, yeah, I'd rather have Chris Bumstead enjoy his Sandow victory and go represent Canada the best he can, and you got nothing else to prove. If he comes back, he could very well lose to Breon. He could tumble a few places. His illness could get worse.
And he is only, he's 24 years old. He's a kid.
Hey, man, listen, it's very hard to walk away when you're at the top of the game because the money machine starts happening. You know, you start having opportunities that were never there before. But we live in an age where some of these athletes can market themselves through their social media, through their businesses, and the smart ones get out intact. But my wisdom has seen many funerals, many guys put the pedal to the metal, crash and burn, and I don't want that for any bodybuilder. So when I witness history like I witnessed over the weekend with Chris Bumstead, I'm like, okay, there's nowhere to go but down. You're not gonna be a better athlete because you're a 2-time Classic Physique champion. You got to beat these guys that were nipping at your heels, and you're sick, like you're ill. Yeah. You know, and so my advice is always to walk away, because if you walk away on top of your game, all they can do is desire you to come back, you know. And I'm one of those guys that walked away at 35 years old and had people wanting me to come back around, and I left them wanting more than giving them too much.
Yeah, I mean, Lee Haney, 31 years old, he walked away with eight Olympias, full health, looked great for 60 whatever he is now.
I think it's the hardest thing to do is to walk away when you're on top of your game, and very rarely do we see that happen, including Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, two of my idols. You stick around for one punch too many and one game too long, and it, you know, you're remembered for the greatness and the accomplishments. Dexter, what he accomplished was historic in being top 4, but he was always a top 5. We were surprised a year ago when he dropped down to the 7th. But because of the absence of the other players, I think that worked very advantageous to Dexter. He didn't have to prove himself to the guys that placed beneath him because he was supposed to beat those guys. We're not. Are you surprised, Ron?
No.
Like, was there someone that Dexter beat that he wasn't supposed to? On paper going in, he wasn't supposed to beat Rolly Winkler.
That's
If
about
Rolly Winkler's healthy.
And Rolly Winkler was on his
healthy,
game. Dexter wasn't beating him. No way.
Then he's right where I predicted him, which was 5th place as a top 5 finalist. That's all I had for Dexter at 49 years old.
Yeah.
Now, Rolly comes in injured and off. He moves up by attrition. But I can't then turn around and say Dexter was all these wonderful, great things by comparison to what he did last year. Dexter was Dexter. And the criticism I have of Dexter were pretty much the same criticisms I had of Dexter a year ago when he placed in 7th. Dexter's the benefactor of absentee and also injury. And that's why I say you can only win if you're in it. And he put himself in a place to be in that conversation. But based on the youth of the other guys, those are 3 guys that I don't see Dexter beating in the remainder of his career because of youth and father time, not lack of effort.
So a lot of people are already looking forward to next year, the 2020 Olympia, because theoretically we should have Shawn Rhoden back on stage. We should have Phil Heath back on stage, Big Ramy, Josh Lenardowitz, Nathan DeAsha. We should have all the guys that we missed this year back on stage. And this was, right. I hate to say it was the weakest Olympia lineup ever, but we were missing a lot of people that should have been there. But
wait. Let's talk about 1981.
Well.
Right. How memorable was the 1981 Olympia? And guess what? It survived, didn't it? I'm just trying to get in the shade. Yeah. Sorry, I'm moving, changing sets and scenery. 1981 Mr. Olympia. Besides Franco Colombo and Tom Platz and maybe Danny Padilla, do you remember anybody that was even in that show?
Was Frank Zane in it?
Yeah, nobody. No, I think they boycotted. A couple of them boycotted that competition. But nonetheless, the hands of time continue on, whether it's a weak contest or not. I remember one of the Olympias, Ron, I was in it. I think we only had 12 athletes.
Wow. Yeah.
And it looked like Saturday night. It looked like it was a sellout. You're still dealing with the best bodybuilders in the world. And while we are the main attraction, the Olympia weekend's bigger than just one division.
Yeah.
If you take away the Mr. Olympia and those bodybuilders, you still have a pretty formidable weekend going on in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And it's not going anywhere. The prize money increased. It was the biggest prize money in the history. I just reviewed the 2001 Olympia. I was the commentator. You know what I said?
No.
I said, these bodybuilders are vying for the overall purse of $350,000. $350,000.
Yeah.
18 years ago, and now it's 1.3, 1.4 million.
Right.
And pretty soon that first place prize will be $500,000. So it is a very lucrative business to be lifting weights. They're not doing anything different than I did back in my day. They're eat, sleeping, and training, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting richly rewarded for it, and they also have the opportunity to eke out a lifestyle for their families that validates their existence. I guarantee you, Brandon Curry's family never thought in a million years he would get a $400,000 payday for doing what he was doing when he first started working out. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the tip of it. He got that check, put that away, do whatever the hell you want to do with it. Now he's going to be traveling the world as the ambassador, like Miss America, for our sport and being the leading man. And he's got a whole country of Kuwait. He's got the island of Hawaii, which is where his wife's from. He's got the state of Tennessee. And he represents all of the world, not the United States. I'm talking China. I'm talking Germany. He is in a very good, comfortable position now to reap the rewards of his sacrifice and hard work. And it's every bodybuilder's dream. If you're lifting weights, it's every bodybuilder's dream. And there's only 15 people that have that Sandow trophy. So we could talk about how weak the lineup was, but you can't win it unless you're in it.
Yeah. You know, I feel obligated to say the lineup wasn't the strongest, but Dan Solomon, Tamarel Gundy, Angelica Nebbia, the whole team, the production team did an incredible job. It was very well run. Stage setting, everything was definitely up a notch. They leveled up from years past. So it's no commentary when I say that it wasn't the best Olympia. It was produced phenomenally well. It's just, as a bodybuilding fan, I want to see all the very best bodybuilders on the world on that stage on that weekend. That's all. And
guess what? And I want to see the Raiders in the Super Bowl every year. It doesn't mean I'm not going to watch it when they don't make it. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there watching the freaking, who is it? The Patriots and the Rams in the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Who played last year? Was that the two teams? I think those were two
Well, the
finalists.
Patriots are always in it, pretty much. So.
Oh, yeah, so it had to be the Patriots and the Rams. I didn't tune out because the Raiders weren't in it. Listen, the Olympia is going to go on. Joe and Ben Weider, what they created in 1965, 55 years ago, Ron.
Yeah.
It's bigger. It's better produced. You've got the right players in the right place. The Amateur Olympia was over 600 athletes strong. And listen, some people were saying I was sugarcoating and being too nice in some of the commentary. Some say I was being too harsh. I can tell you, in the observation of all the Olympia weekends I've gone to, the way things were handled, Lee Haney, Mike Christian, Barry DeMay, Tony Pearson, Shaquille O'Neal, Tito Ortiz, Mark Wahlberg, everybody came through that weekend and showed the love. I actually saw the guy, I saw Ray J, he's a singer. I saw the singer from As Yet. There are different personalities, Mario Lopez, different personalities from different areas of the world. Sorry, my notifications, that were supporting this weekend. And David Pecker entrusted that to Tamer and Dan and Tamer picked the right players to make sure that it got carried through. And I think being a part of that, and mind you, I've been a part of all of them since 1988. Yeah. There's nothing really that they need to improve on. Would I like to see that Olympia housed at the same place the Expo is, like it was at the Mandalay Bay?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Would I like to see the Mr. Olympia moved out of Las Vegas? No, but guess what? In this time, in this day and age, I wouldn't be against it. I mean, if they said next year we're going to go to Disney World out in Orlando, Florida, or if they said they were going to move it to New York City, or maybe, I'm wondering how that might be received, because there's nothing they need to really improve on the Olympia weekend. The webcast by Travis Chapman and Patrick Rivera, sponsored by iHerb and Digital Muscle, was second to none. The main sponsors, Trifecta and Wings of Strength, none of it would have been possible without those players. And they're movers and shakers in the industry. And with the return of the Ms. Olympia next year, that's going to bring in people that have been boycotting the Mr. Olympia, because you've got these women with muscle that we both know there's a culture out there that follows, loves, and worships that. And now they're going to be welcomed back to that weekend. So, and then with the inclusion of wellness, if wellness is at the Mr. Olympia, Ron, I know you're going to be front and center.
That's the only thing I care about is the wellness division, pretty much.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So they may be adding two more. Well, they're definitely adding women's bodybuilding, but if wellness is there, like, where do you fit it all in?
Well, did you hear my suggestion for wellness in general? 2 divisions. 2 divisions for wellness. What are they?
Thick and thicker?
No, Brazilians, and everyone else.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to play out. Our pro bikini is leaning that way. We had like 3 of the top 5 were from Brazil.
Absolutely.
So overall, I've got 0 to complain about, and I think our media, all outlets of media, are doing a very good job of covering the Olympia weekend. And listen, since anybody can make a post, we welcome our haters because we know they're watching. If I hate something, Ron, do you even pay attention to it, or you just turn the channel and tune out?
I hate NASCAR. I don't hate it, but I have no interest in it. You're never going to find me commenting negatively on it. I just don't care.
That's it. It's crazy. So, and I won't walk in and it won't be on your TV when I come in your house. So if you don't like what we're doing here, turn the channel.
Yeah. Shaun, you've been very generous with your time. Let's have some plugs. Shawn Ray Hawaiian Classic. How do people find out about it? When and where? Well,
the Shawn Ray Classic is coming up on November the 23rd at the Hilton Hawaiian Village Hotel. It's a national qualifier. As a matter of fact, right before, the weekend before, Hidatari Yamagishi is bringing 3 of my athletes from the Shawn Ray Maui Classic I had in March, and they're all going to be competing over in Japan at the Amateur Olympia. That'll be the weekend prior, November the 17th. But if you want to get qualified for the Nationals in 2020, come out to Waikiki, enjoy some sun and fun, get some national trophies, some big medals, and some nice prizes and awards, and publicity. Waikiki, it's at the Hilton Hawaiian Hotel. And you can register online at srhawaiianclassic.com.
srhawaiianclassic.com. And what's your Instagram yourself, Shaun?
Check me out at Shawn Ray IFBB Pro, or you can follow the bodybuilding show at Shawn Ray Hawaiian Classic.
Well, our connection held up. We had our doubts, but because you're out there in lovely Laguna Beach, and somehow it all worked.
Yeah, buddy.
Cool. Well, Shaun.
Absolutely, man. Keep doing your thing, Ron.
Thank you so much for your expert commentary, insights. I'm glad you don't sugarcoat, because I'd be asleep right now if you had been doing that the whole time.
You got it, man. I'll talk to you. Thank
All right,
you.
everybody, thanks for watching. This has been the RonLine Report with Shawn Ray.
Peace.
All right, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.